That's the kind of sound you probably expect from an amp that looks like this. This is the Peavey Classic 20, and of course it does that sound, but it also does a lot more. The Peavey Classic series are lovingly known as the Mississippi Tweeds, and this one is full of bells and whistles. I've been playing this amp for a couple of weeks now, and every time I plug in, it makes me smile, and that is a massive factor in whether I recommend a product or not. Of course, I'm going to play the obvious Telecaster, but I'm also going to put a bunch of other guitars through it and some pedals because this amp is very versatile, and it's the only amp I've ever had a noise complaint about here in the studio because it gets loud and stays clean. And it wasn't until the ringing in my ears subsided that I noticed how loud this is. What you've heard so far is channel 2, and I'm going to go back to channel 1 by pressing that button. You can also do it on the front of the amp, by the way, but I'm using the foot switch to show you that it's got one. And then I've got the volume all the way up to 10, but I'm gonna creep it up. And what I'll do is I'll play a little loop into the loop pedal, and then we'll increase the volume. So that hit right maximum volume, the full 20 watts it's got, and it still stayed relatively clean, which is a surprise because I was expecting a lot more breakup a lot earlier. If you do want more breakup earlier, you can switch the amp to 5 watt or 1 watt mode. So here's that loop again, and I'll put it on 5 watt mode and 1 watt mode. That's 1 watt mode, and you can almost hear me. And now at a respectable volume, it still sounds pretty good, but you can hear my voice, even though I'm shouting a little bit. There we go. Whew! It's surprisingly not much difference in volume between 5 and 20. That was a shock. Us guitar players always think that 20 watts is 4 times 5, and even though I know it isn't, part of my lizard brain still expects it to be. Let's take a look at the controls on the front panel. We've got the power switch and the on standby switch. We've also got the TSI red light, which gives us 2 green lights telling me my tubes are okay. That is the tube status indicator. Then we've got a reverb knob, which we'll definitely come back to in a bit, a 3-band EQ, a post and pre for the overdrive channel or channel 2, and then a volume for channel 1 and the input. We'll save the back panel for a little later on because I want to get some sounds out of it, and around the back, it's got a lot going on. So here's the cleanest it can go at a regular volume. I'll put it back in 20 watt mode. So it's really clean without being clinical and brittle. So it's got plenty of bottom end and warmth. I'm going to play another loop and we'll check out the EQ settings because I think they made a really sensible decision on where to set those settings. The treble can add or take away just enough without being too much. So it never gets too harsh and never gets too muddy either. And as for the mids, you push those a little bit and suddenly the sound jumps forward in the room. And as for the bass, you can clear it up if you want to make space for a bass player, or you can push it if you want to fill the room with bass. Let's talk about the reverb for a moment, because I think this is possibly the weakest part of the amp. At low levels, it's perfectly acceptable, and I much rather have an amp with reverb in it than an amp with no reverb in it. However, when you get into that sort of top end of the reverb and it really starts to jump out, there seems to be some sort of almost shimmery chorus thing on the top, and I don't like it. Let's hear it again, but as it's on top, I'll try and show what I don't like. So down here, you can hear it sitting on top of the lower notes. Yeah, right at the tail, you can sort of hear it sort of warbling a bit. Not so obvious in the top end, the dusty end of the neck, but down there, it's just something. I hear the lack of realness. So back it off to about there, and it's fine. And maybe some of you haven't even noticed that, but once I heard it, I couldn't get away from it. And I'm going to compare that now to the 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗪, which is a real spring in a reverb pedal, and you can just hear that reverb's not so fake. Actually, this is a great opportunity to tell you that you can not only switch channels with a foot switch, you can also switch the reverb on and off, and you can switch the effects loop on and off. So on this setting, button number 1 will turn the effects loop on and off, and button number 2 will turn the internal reverb of the amp on and off. So here's the no reverb, here's with reverb, and let's play something with the external reverb. This is the 𝗦𝗨𝗪𝗛. And here's the internal reverb. Maybe I'm being a little bit unfair on the internal reverb there, because that actually felt really good. But listening to it back, I'll probably notice, yeah, but it felt good as a player. Let's do some more sounds. Let's put some pedals through it and get some overdrive out of it and the rest. And most importantly, let's change away from this Telecaster. What's he gonna play now? Oh! I've gone back to the internal reverb, and I'll use that for the rest of the video, unless I say different, of course. Let's try channel 2, the overdrive channel, with some humbuckers. Still might have a touch too much reverb on there. It sounds phenomenal. It's more than just a Fender looking amp. It looks like a Fender Tweed, of course, or not, maybe not of course, but to me it looks like a Fender Tweed, but there's elements of Vox AC15, AC30 in there. There's a chiminess that Fenders don't have. And a little bit of backstory between me and the amp. My first tube amp that I ever tried in my house when I was a teenager was the Peavey Classic 30. And previous to that, I had a Squier 15, you know, the little tiny one. And this said Peavey 30. So I thought that would be twice as loud. But the Squier is a crappy old transistor practice amp. And I remember getting the amp home late at night, putting the amp on 1 on the Peavey 30, just plugging in the guitar and it going, and waking up the whole house, and I had to do it, and I gave it a big old power chord, and I got in big trouble. So yeah, thanks Peavey, thanks for that. Since then, I've learned a little bit, and here's a top tip: don't try a valve amp, regardless of what loud volume it is, when your whole house family is sleeping. But speaking of that, that's a nice segue that I did not intend to do. This has a silent operating mode, so you can actually defeat the speaker. Where's the button? Button's back here somewhere. There. So, I've not unplugged the speaker cable, I've just turned the speaker off, because It's got XLR out and USB out, so you can record with XLR straight to your audio interface, or you can use it as your audio interface. It's pretty basic as an audio interface. You just plug it in and it works. And in fact, I've been recording this whole session with the USB as well. So I'll play that back for you in a moment. And we could also hear the DI as well. So we'll do that. And I'll do that in the next sound sample. I'll get back-to-back microphone, which is the 𝗬𝗢𝗪𝗡𝗪 dynamic mic, then the USB, then the DI. And you can hear for yourself and see what you think. Let's go back to the clean channel because I'm going to put some pedals through it. But before I do, this also has a boost built in to the amp, which you can only access via the foot switch, which is rather frustrating. But I guess you wouldn't want to adjust the boost, go back to the amp, time for the solo, back to the amp, click it on, and then play. That would make no sense. So it makes sense, Peavey, but would it really have hurt you to put a boost switch on the amp as well? Right, here's clean. So I'll follow that up with a little bit of boost. Here's that clean again. So it's there. I don't know how many dBs it is, but it's enough to get you heard above the noise. So if you're going to go for a solo, you don't actually need a boost pedal because that'll lift you up. And I don't think it's boosting the front end. Or if it is, it's doing it cleanly. So it doesn't appear to be adding more gain. It appears to be making the power amp section louder. I don't know, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments and tell Peavey what you think. So hopefully you've heard there is plenty of clean on tap, but there's also a lot of gain. And if I go back to channel 2, the overdrive channel, this is where post and pre controls come into play. The post is the volume of the channel and the pre is the preamp. So think of that as volume and gain of the second channel. And this one is quite sensitive, shall we say. So I like to have it all the way up, which I think sounds the best. But if you do have it that way, you've got to be really careful with the pre. So I'm going to put it almost, well, let's say about 3/4. And then I'm going to push the pre and see how much gain we can get out of the amp, for which I'm going to change guitar again, because I can, and because I want to. That's where I can really hear that reverb upsetting me. Right, so pushing the pre up and possibly adjusting the post to make sure it's not so loud. In fact, let's start off a little quieter than that. Now, I'm going to loop it and push that pre. I've really enjoyed that. It's getting a lot bigger and a lot fatter as I go up the gain level. So I adjusted the EQ as well, but it's great. It really is. And don't forget that you don't have to get that loud because you can put it in 5 watt and 1 watt mode. Or you can defeat the speaker and just go silent. It also has headphones out. Nuts. I might have said earlier that I was going to do pedals and then did something else. That's just because I was so excited. Let's do pedals now. First, a bit of clean. Kind of lost it at the end there, but yeah, it's great fun. That's the Spruce Goose from EHX, by the way. I think it's a blues breaker kind of pedal, but stick it through this and combine it with the tubes, and you've got, I think, enough for blues rock. The amp does blues rock easily without any pedals. However, it has that second channel, which is a little bit aggressive instantly. So I think this setting is somewhere in between the first clean channel and the second really quite potentially heavy channel, which you can control with your volume, but I forgot to. Let's do some fuzz. That's actually quite raspy. There's quite a lot of top end. It backed off the treble, sounded right. I love it. What is it? It's more voxy the more I play it with the fuzz. So this reacts to that fuzz pedal like a Vox AC15 more than a Fender Tweed would, in my experience. So that's odd. Let's keep it distorted and go for my ratty sort of sound, so I can do some chugga-chugs. The beauty of having a combo, I can do that without having to reach down any further. I don't really like that Black Secret pedal very much. It's not very versatile, but the amp makes it sing. Let's go the opposite direction and use the compressor to get some funky chops through it. Here's without compressor. And with compressor. And this is where I can really define that every sound I've put through this amp has had lots of attack, and it just jumps out and grabs your face and tries to rip it off. And then, goes all bluesy and tries to tell you a nice little story about it. So I'm amazed. Maybe it won't go full high gain with pedals, but it's doing a great job of everything else so far. I just want to go back to the telly for a moment for my own enjoyment, so bear with me, but I'm going to play what I think the amp looks like it should sound like. What are we doing? Great fun. Right, let's have a look at the back of the amp. As you can see, there's a lot going on here, and most of it's plugged in, which is unusual for me. Starting over that side, we've got the power, and you can actually switch this amp between 120 volts and 240, or 115 and 220 to 230. So basically, you can take this amp to America or from America or somewhere else that uses the smaller voltage to somewhere with a higher voltage, such as here in Austria. Then you've got a fuse. Then we've got these these sockets for the channel changing and the effects loop and reverb. Then we've got a sender return for our effects loop. Then we've got the ground lift, which is necessary if you're having problems connecting, say, the amp to something that's a PA system or recording device, and you get this earth ground hum. So you can just press that and that'll get rid of it. Then we can defeat the speaker, or you can enable the speaker. And then rather ridiculously, you can plug headphones in, which is nuts. And that will use the same speaker emulation as is going out of the DI. Then you can switch your, what's it called? Impedance between 16 ohms and 8 ohms. Then you can actually plug in an external speaker if you want, because that internal speaker you can plug out. Then you've got 20 watts, 5 watts, and 1 watt for that. And then you've got USB. Pretty simple, really. So, you might have gathered that I really dig the Classic 20. I loved the Classic 30 and kind of always wanted to get one, but it was just too loud. And the Classic 20 has a very similar sound to the Classic 30, if not so close that I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But this has so many more features. And if you think you've seen this amp before, you may have seen the mini head version, which is the same amp, but just a head. Now you get the combo with the Peavey speaker, which I think sounds absolutely brilliant. I wasn't sure if I'd like the Peavey speaker, but as a combo, wow. However, being a combo means that it is darn heavy, or at least heavier than I'm used to. It's coming in at around 16 kilograms, and with the handle on top, which is sturdy, and I don't think it's going to give you any issues, it does feel like you need to have two hands carrying it. So maybe I've just got so used to having light amps, but it does feel like a bit of a beast, and it's nowhere near as heavy as the Classic 30. Sound-wise, the Peavey Classic 20 will do anything from jazz and country up to sort of blues rock and almost hard rock. It'll get you into AC/DC territory, but that's about as far as it goes before it starts to sound a bit, I don't know, bad. At the top end of the gain, there's not a lot that I like, but in the mid-range of that gain, absolutely beautiful. If you want more, you're going to have to put a pedal through it. And boy, does it take pedals well. Everything that I've played through it sounds like the sound that I'm used to through my Fender Deluxe Reverb, albeit with a little bit more sparkle, a bit more chime. So that lends me again to say this is a bit more Vox than it is Fender Tweed, to my ear at least. Maybe it's the combination of the speaker. There are some things that I don't like about the Peavey Classic 20, and during my weeks playing it, I've made some notes. So the first one I've already talked about. The reverb isn't the best reverb I've ever heard. I'm glad it's there. It's got an effects loop, so you can put your own reverb like I did. But yeah, that could have done with a bit more tweaking. The second thing is it's quite heavy. I've mentioned that already. The third thing is that it's got a plastic input jack. That there is totally plastic, whereas the jacks on the back are plastic and metal, which seem to be the same ones they've put on the Classic 30 model. Speaking of plastic, yeah, this channel switcher is plastic. So it's hard, heavy duty plastic, but if I really tried, I could probably put my foot through that. That being said, it would definitely survive a trip down the stairs like that, or yeah. If you look after it, you're absolutely fine. If you're an absolute meathead like me sometimes, that's going to cause you problems at some point. But it's fine. It's not really a gripe. It's just there for me to say. What else? Oh, I tried opening it round the back, getting the screws off to have a look at the speaker to get some shots. I couldn't get the amp out. I couldn't get the back panel off. I couldn't do anything to get inside this amp. So if you ever need to change tubes or do some sort of servicing on it, I wouldn't want to be the person that has to open that amp up. I was yanking on it and I couldn't get it out, which means there might be some screws in there that I don't know about, or that it's so tightly built that it's hard to get out, therefore hard to get back in again. Yeah, so there's that. And what was else? Oh yeah, the white lettering on this mirror front might be hard to see in a gig situation. So you've got flashing lights going at you. That might be a problem, but there are so few controls, you should know what you're doing already. And then finally, on the second channel, this pre and post is a little bit sensitive. And if you have the post all the way up, you just got to flick that pre and you're in bleeding ears territory, which might be what you're after. As for the pros of the amp, I think I've covered it mostly in this video, but I think they definitely outweigh the cons. I also love that they've still got the best logo ever, the Peavey logo on the front, and it is sort of hidden a little bit in brown in case you don't want to see it. But I think it looks brilliant, and I love that Peavey haven't changed it yet. Links to the Classic 20 combo and to the head version will be in the video description and first comment if you need them, and I recommend that you do need them. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!